Autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder, and it is now popularly and commonly known as the autism spectrum condition. That is a condition that is seen when children are growing up and emerges or occurs as a consequence of differences in brain wiring.
Difficulties in social interaction and communication. So the individual is sort of disconnected with his own environment, and he's withdrawn at times.
The expressive communication is very poor in these kids. It's not like they don't think like you, like me or other kids. They think as much as we all do. But when they are not able to express all this, there comes a lag and there comes certain behaviors which we think those are unwanted.
Some stereotypical behaviors that are very commonly seen in people who are on the autism spectrum. That stereotypical behavior or a repetitive kind of movement or activities that they do, they are basically doing it to calm themselves down, to cope with whatever sensory overstimulation that they are going through. Sensory overstimulation is when we are sitting in an environment, we are able to filter out all the irrelevant information, and we can focus on something that we need to focus on. But a person who is on the autism spectrum is not able to filter out the irrelevant information. So all the sensory information, the visual inputs, the auditory inputs, the tactile inputs, everything is bombarding his brain. And that person is not able to filter out the irrelevant information. So he finds it very difficult to cope with everything that is happening all around him. And therefore that person sort of withdraws into his own shell.
So why are we interested in early intervention? And that is because we know that the early developing brain is very amenable to a phenomenon that we call plasticity. Neuroplasticity is the ability of the brain to change based on input, based on behavioral stimuli, based on the learning that we provide. It's the reason why children learn in the classroom, all children, not just children with autism. For instance, there is no region of the brain that is allocated to reading. Okay? Regions of the brain meant for hearing, which are sitting up here. Regions of the brain meant for visualizing, which are sitting at the back. And regions of the brain meant for language, which are sitting over here. All of these connect together by associating sound with symbol with meaning. And that's how a reading circuit gets established.
For example, we hear something, this is Papa, I heard the word Papa. And then there is a visual input that goes to the brain to tell that this is the face of Papa. And then the correlation happens between the two centers of the brain, the hearing center and the visual center. And then the language center gets stimulated to speak the word Papa. Now, all these centers are so nicely interconnected in the brain of a regular neurotypical child that the child picks up the word, sees the face, and then says Papa. But a child who's in the autism spectrum has a disconnect in these centers. He's able to hear the word Papa clearly. He's able to see the face of Papa very clearly. But when it comes to correlating and then developing that ability to speak that word Papa whenever he sees the picture of Papa or looks at Papa or hears Papa is not happening.
"25 to 30 years ago, when the first efforts to change things started happening in India. About 30 years back, there were no services that were specific to people with autism. There were very few doctors who understood autism or knew not just how to diagnose them or even what was to be done with children with autism. The few individuals who received a diagnosis, families were often told that iske saath kuch hone wala nahi hai, forget about this child, find a place to put him in, go and have another child.
The incidence of autism has increased remarkably in the last 25 years, and we believe this is largely because of increased awareness. We still do not have very good evidence about the incidence and the occurrence of it in India, but worldwide figures suggest 1 in 66 is impacted by the neurodevelopmental condition of autism. It is seen more in boys versus girls, and as a consequence has also been associated with a genetic condition.
First special needs school for autism started in 1994, and then people started getting trained, teachers started getting trained. A lot of that work we were involved in, starting the first teacher training course, starting the first school, starting the whole concept of getting children with autism into mainstream classrooms, changing policy, changing law. And the reality is that most of the services currently in the country are all run by parents. There are a few that are run by professionals, but the vast majority are parent headed and parent directed.
I'm a proud mom of an autistic 12-year-old kid. The moment I used to come back from home, I called him and he would come running to me and play with me. But then there were certain other things which my in-laws also saw a difference in him from other kids. Initially we were like, he's a boy, so he'll start speaking late, he had few words. So we were not really worried about it. Being a doctor by profession but from a different field, we never thought that he would have autism. So there is a lag initially in social communication and eye contact and other things, which if not intervened duly in time, it goes on increasing. So we also ran, like other parents, we also ran from therapist to therapist, doctors to doctors, thinking of such a good plan for him that would help him overcome his difficulties.
When he was born, he was a complete normal child and he had been achieving all the milestones till the age of 1.5 years. And it was after 1.5 we started realizing that he is not speaking up. Even though he is following certain few words he started, but he was not really speaking up. So we started worrying and we went initially to a doctor, and doctor would say that, it's a boy, so it may take another, sometimes boy speaks up at the age of 2.5 years, 3 years. So that was there, but still our worry started, in that very process. So that was the first time that we have come to know about what is autism. It is very difficult for us to accept that time, and it was in our wildest of dream, because he has been all those years a very happy, smiley and full of lively, and suddenly he started the gap. We couldn't find it in that point of time, and that was the time we started knocking door here and there, and we had to go to Bangalore, we come to Delhi, and we were to Bombay to really know, because it was that we were also ignorant, as a parent, what is autism, what really. So we started searching and reading books and meeting doctors and therapists.
The most important crux of early intervention is identifying that there is a child who is having difficulties in connecting with his environment or the people around him. As soon as an identification is made, parents who feel that their child is lagging behind in some milestones should definitely meet a pediatrician and a clinical psychologist and get the child assessed and evaluated. There are some tests and tools that have come up to have a confirmatory assessment and a diagnosis of autism at the age of say 3 to 3.5 years. One of the tools is from the National Trust, which is called ISA, And there are other tools that have been coming along for a very long time, ADOS and CARS, that are used to assess the severity of the autism on the entire spectrum.
If an individual has pretty obvious symptomatic behaviors, then the ESA tool is able to identify that yes, this person is autism. But if the person does not have any very obvious behaviors that are mentioned in the ESA, where the behaviors are much more nuanced and the person has to have much greater understanding of autism, then that person does not get a diagnosis. So the reality is most individuals with autism who we send for at least I know in Delhi, who we send for a diagnosis, for getting a disability certificate, are not receiving the certificate. And as a result, they are not able to sit for their CBSE examinations, or they are not able to get the tool for other things that they might want to use it for instance, for employment.
So finding a skill set is very important for a kid, what interests him and what would help him in future to have an independent life. Also, there are certain things that he likes. Recently, since a year or so, we've been doing painting with him, and he really enjoys painting. That has increased his focus, concentration also, making him independent to do whatever he can, making him independent for a future survival where he is not dependent on other people for everything.
Early intervention is very, very essential for children with autism, because the moment you are able to understand their skill sets and you tap that and you put them on the right track, giving them the right kind of intervention, be it music, be it sports, be it academic, and they will eventually come out in flying colors. And so what we have experienced and what we have experimented with my son, he was very small, and that time I had seen him doing the drum beats and trying to play with a small guitar in the on a stage show. So then I could discuss with my wife, and we thought of introducing music as a means of communication, because he had an expressive communication delay, and that was a point of time where we could see his irritations as he was growing, because he was not able to communicate what he actually likes to communicate. And music is a therapy also. It is a therapy in autism also, largely now this thing has been recognized. And there are schools of autism which are introducing music therapy as a means of communication. So we introduced music at home, and luckily we could see the changes in him. The moment we introduce music, we are able to engage him, because engaging these children is also very essential, because their engagement time is very, very short span.
So to make sure that those neuronal connections are developed at a better rate, we need to give enriched environment to the child. To give an enriched environment to the child, we need to use a lot of pictures or visuals that are able to register better. We use skill training along with introducing academics, sports, music, dance, holistic development along with skill trainings. And once we start inculcating structure in their training, things happen tremendously beautifully. We see them blossom, we see them develop like no other neurotypical can. So it is amazing to see their progress if we use a lot of visual supports in their teaching and training, incorporated into structured teaching.
Look at this as a neurodiversity in the human condition, okay? And we think it is time that society began to look at it as a variation of what we see in human beings. And therefore our whole approach towards autism spectrum disorder is now of embracing this diversity in the human condition and almost embracing these individuals so that we can begin to live as a more humane society.
People on the autism spectrum are able to do unbelievable kinds of activities that people like us, regular neurotypical people, find it very difficult to do. For example, they are able to focus on details like none of us can. If we give them a plate which is full of, say for example, I'm just giving a simple example, it is full of one kind of dal or pulse, and there are 4 or 5 grains of some other pulse or dal. If you give it to me, I will take like 2 hours to search for the 5 grains of a separate dal. But if you give it to a person who is on the autism spectrum, the probabilities are that he'll be able to spot those 5 grains within seconds and take them out, because they are able to focus on the finest of details that we might just miss. So they are made for very, very high quality kind of sorting. So when it comes to data, we can give them data to just sort out the 8-year-old students from this list, or just sort out this particular kind of diagnosis from this list, and they're able to do those tasks tremendously well.
The notion of perfect pitch is very high in individuals with autism. Some of them have amazing abilities at math, some of them have amazing abilities at drawing, at visual memories, and some of them are just gentle, empathetic people, okay? It's just that we have not been able to recognize it.
Each person on the autism spectrum is unique. He has his own set of strengths, he has his own set of weaknesses. We cannot categorize them as these people who have these qualities, these people who have these qualities. They are all unique and different. Most of the children who are on the autism spectrum do grow into adults who are on the autism spectrum. And for training adults to be independent and to live a life of dignity, vocational training is the most important way to give them a direction, to provide meaningful engagement to them, as well as training them for more employment. We have a shop in the school and we do a retail shop management course. So the students who are on the autism spectrum, they learn to create their products and then display them in the shop and then manage the shop completely independently.
We followed like the structured learning for him, and we have seen a good improvement in him. It is still challenging, but then okay, he is improving like with all the like therapies or with all the activities that he has been doing in the school.
So this is my appeal to corporates and the government to create employment opportunities for people on the autism spectrum. They are an amazing workforce. They are made to be the most successful employees. They will be a boon to your workplace. Why? Because they are no gossip people. They are no nonsense people. Your other employees might be gossiping, might be not focused on their job and talking about things that you don't want them to talk about. But a person who's on the autism spectrum is going to be rule oriented, is going to be focused on the job, is going to do his job. Even the most boring and the repetitive kind of tasks they are going to do with utmost sincerity, because once they find an interest in a job, they are able to do the same kind of activity for hours and hours together without getting bored.
The biggest worry is what happens to people who do not have the resources, the financial resources. What happens to their children? What happens to the poor? What happens to a poor adult who has autism? Who will look after them? Because as citizens, we have to think not only about people who have money, but also people who don't have money, because they are as much citizens of the country as everybody else. And that is why it is very important for the government to step in and do something about adults who will not have the resources to pay for their stay when their parents are no longer there.
Therapies are very expensive. One child cannot improve with only one therapy. They need behavior therapy, they need speech therapy, they need sports, they need everything, and it is very expensive. If somebody is below average, it's a low middle class family, it is very difficult without a government aid.
Our organization is also one of those that has set up what we call assisted living for adults who would need support all their lives. But the danger of this is that it is such an expensive program to run, because you not only have to provide for life for the young adults who are living there, you also have to be able to pay the people who are working there. So it makes it an extremely resource intensive program.
Always at the back of our mind that what will be the future of our child, how independent he will be.
And there was a time when people with autism, when they would try to travel, they would often be stopped because their behaviors would be seen as threatening, and because a lot of this kind of discomfort comes from lack of awareness. The CISF made an effort to train their Jawans through a number of trainings across the country. Now they are not. So they take the metro to go to shop, or they take the metro to go to eat out, or they take the metro for a event that they're going to attend, and they travel without any trouble. So these are changes that have happened. So good changes are happening, but a lot more needs to happen.
Should not be any separate school for our kids. We all should. Kids are kids. They should all be under one roof. They should not be like, okay, these are autistic, these are Down syndrome, these are different kids, so they need a different roof. No, we all need one roof. We all need to grow together, and we all need to be part of the society.
Though we have the Right to Education Act, which says that persons with disabilities can have education in regular classrooms, most schools turn away students with autism because they say we do not know how to teach them. So despite the fact that there is a law in place, the implementation does not really happen. But having said that, there are a few schools across the country that are beginning to include people with autism in the classrooms. Some of them do not include them in the regular classroom. They create a separate place where they have the children, but hopefully that will eventually lead to most children being in the regular classrooms.
So society, yes, you are changing, you are accepting, but our children need more than that. We need more involvement, we need more acceptance, we need to be part of you. We don't need to be accepted as special as somebody different. We are just like you, and accept as we are. That is my part on the acceptance.
दवाई भी कड़ाई भी का मंत्र लिए वैक्सीनेशन की चल रही है लहर, गांव-गांव शहर-शहर। लेकिन जब इतना किया है सब्र, तो थोड़े और समय रखें कोरोना पर कड़ी नजर। ना छोड़ें 2 गज दूरी, सैनिटाइजेशन और मास्क की सावधान डगर। रहें इस खतरे से सचेत हर प्रहर। कोरोना को हराना है तो मास्क जरूर लगाना है।
मास्क अप इंडिया,
मास्क अप इंडिया।
सातों सुरों की सहेली, रंगों की है ये पहेली, सतरंगी है ये अटखेली रंगोली है ये रंगोली सुरमई गीतों की है ये रंगोली रंगोली है ये रंगोली सातों सुरों की है ये रंगोली रंगोली.
Namaste, I'm Dr. Guleria. I'd like to share some very important factual information with you. The safety and efficacy data from clinical trials of vaccine candidates are examined thoroughly by the drug regulator of our country before granting license for the same. Hence, all the COVID-19 vaccines that receive license will have comparable safety and efficacy. However, it's important that we ensure that the entire schedule of vaccination is completed by one type of vaccine, as different COVID-19 vaccines are not interchangeable. So persons with active and symptomatic COVID-19 infection may increase the risk of spreading the same to others at vaccination site. Also, we do not know how effective the vaccine will be in such a situation when one is already having active infection. For this reason, I believe that active and symptomatic individuals should defer vaccination for at least 14 days after the symptoms have resolved. Yes, it is advisable to receive the complete schedule of COVID-19 vaccine irrespective of past history of infection with COVID-19. This will help you to develop a better immune response against the disease. Yes, I think it's very important that these individuals who are having one or more of these comorbid conditions take the vaccine because they are actually high-risk groups. They must take the COVID-19 vaccine to protect themselves, and it's important for them to understand that their medications will not interfere with the vaccine efficacy. Vaccine will be introduced only when the safety is proven, as is true for other vaccines. We will have some degree of common side effects in some individuals, and these could be in the form of mild fever, pain at the site of injection, body aches, etc. States have been asked to start making arrangements to deal with any COVID-19 vaccine-related side effects as one of the measures towards safe vaccine delivery. 2 doses of vaccine 28 days apart are needed.